Marcus Robinson watched his son Jamal's face light up as he wheeled him up the newly installed ramp to their front door. "This is really ours, Dad?" Jamal asked, his voice cracking with emotion. At 16, having spent his entire life in cramped apartments where doorways were barely wide enough for his wheelchair on bad days, this moment felt surreal. Marcus, a 42-year-old software engineer who'd worked double shifts for 5 years to afford this moment, simply nodded, his throat too tight for words. Oakwood Heights, with its pristine sidewalks and top-rated accessible high school, represented everything he'd sacrificed for. As they'd explored their new home, the doorbell rang, their first visitors. The welcoming committee consisted of 3 women clutching gift baskets, their smiles freezing momentarily when Marcus opened the door. "Oh, you're the new homeowners," the woman in front said, recovering quickly. "Welcome to Oakwood Heights. I'm Patricia Winters, HOA president." Her eyes darted past Marcus to Jamal, her expression shifting from surprise to something that made Marcus's stomach tighten. She thrust the basket forward while the other women exchanged glances. "We have very specific standards here," Patricia continued, her voice honeyed but eyes cold. "I've taken the liberty of highlighting the key HOA regulations. The last owners were quite familiar with our expectations." As they departed, Marcus overheard one whisper. Did the realtor even show them the covenant? Jamal, ever perceptive despite his youth, placed a hand on his father's arm. "It's okay, Dad. We've dealt with worse." Marcus forced a smile, not wanting to taint this day they dreamed of for so long. But that night, as he unpacked boxes in the kitchen, he carefully read through the HOA regulations, noting the excessive detail and punitive fine structure that seemed designed to keep certain people out. Marcus poured himself a glass of whiskey and continued reading the covenant, his frown deepening with each page. The document specified everything from acceptable shades of exterior paint, the color codes that all fell within beige to light tan, to approved tree species and even appropriate holiday decorations. One section particularly caught his eye, a clause about maintaining neighborhood character that was vague enough to justify almost any complaint. "Dad?" Jamal's voice came from the hallway as he maneuvered his wheelchair toward the kitchen. Despite the late hour, he was still too excited to sleep. "What are you reading?" Marcus quickly flipped the binder closed. "Just some boring house stuff." He forced a smile. "Shouldn't you be asleep? Big day of unpacking tomorrow." 3 weeks later, Marcus stared in disbelief at the 5th HOA violation notice taped to his door. "Unauthorized vegetation in garden bed, $150 fine." The unauthorized vegetation was a tomato plant Jamal had started in science class. Yesterday it had been the basketball hoop, identical to the Hendersons across the street. Before that, garbage cans, mailbox height, and excessive sidewalk use. Jamal practicing with his new forearm crutches. Each notice bore Patricia Winters' flowery signature. That evening, the neighborhood social media page lit up with comments about maintaining community standards after someone posted a photo of Marcus's house with a circle around the tomato plant. When Marcus responded politely explaining its significance to Jamal, comments mysteriously disappeared. Determined to address this properly, Marcus attended the monthly HOA meeting, dressed in his best suit despite coming straight from work. As he raised his hand to speak during open forum, Patricia called time. "We've run over schedule," she announced, though her watch showed they were 15 minutes early. In the parking lot, Marcus approached her directly. "Ms. Winters, I'd like to discuss these notices." Patricia cut him off. "Mr. Robinson, perhaps you didn't understand when purchasing. Oakwood Heights maintains its property values through strict adherence to guidelines." Her eyes narrowed. "If you find our community standards challenging, there are more affordable neighborhoods east side that might better suit your situation." A younger board member nearby looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. That night, Marcus found Jamal researching HOA laws. "Dad, I think what they're doing is called selective enforcement. It's illegal." Marcus sat beside his son, pride mixing with sadness that his 16-year-old already understood how the world worked. "Yes, it is, but proving it is another matter entirely." "Look at this," Jamal said, turning his laptop screen. "The Baxter family on Sycamore Court has the exact same basketball hoop. I found their Instagram. The photo showed a white family celebrating their son's birthday beside an identical hoop. And here's the Wilsons with that stone garden gnome collection that's way more of a violation than my tomato plant." Marcus squeezed his son's shoulder. "Good detective work. Start documenting everything, dates, times, photos comparing our property to others. We'll build a case." The doorbell rang, startling them both. It was nearly 9 p.m. Marcus approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see an elderly white couple shuffling nervously on the porch. He opened the door slowly. "Evening," the man said, removing his hat. "I'm Walter Green. This is my wife, Eleanor." We live in the blue house 2 streets over. Eleanor stepped forward, holding a foil-covered dish. We bring lasagna to all new neighbors, but she hesitated, looking embarrassed. Patricia has been discouraging folks from welcoming you properly. Walter nodded grimly. Been living here 30 years, and this isn't how we used to do things. Not everyone agrees with how she's treating your family. Marcus invited them in, surprised when they accepted without hesitation. As they chatted in the living room, Walter leaned in conspiratorially. Patricia's been pushing families out for years. The Guyans, the Garcias, the Paddles all found their lives made miserable until they sold. The Mord's terrified of her. She knows everyone's secrets. He pulled out a business card. My nephew's a civil rights attorney. When you're ready to fight back, call him. After they left, Jamal looked thoughtfully at the card. I think we've got allies, Dad. Marcus nodded, a new determination settling in his chest. And they've just confirmed what we suspected. This isn't about tomato plants or basketball hoops. It's about us, Jamal finished, his young face hardening with resolve. So what's our next move? Dr. Myers, Jamal's physical therapist, adjusted the tension on his new lightweight crutches. You're making incredible progress, Jamal. These should give you more independence. Jamal's eyes lit up. So if I could go around the block by myself. For most teenagers, such a simple desire would be unremarkable. For Jamal, who'd spent years being told what he couldn't do, it represented freedom. After 3 supervised practice walks, Marcus reluctantly agreed to let Jamal venture out alone. 30 minutes. Phone and GPS tracking. Text when you turn each corner. Jamal rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Dad, I'm going 2 blocks, not deploying to Afghanistan. That first solo walk became a daily ritual. Jamal meticulously planned his route, timing his steps between landmarks. The blue house with wind chimes, 3 minutes. The corner with the interesting rock garden, 2 minutes more. The house with the golden retriever who wagged through the fence, another 4 minutes. He created a narrated walking podcast that only he could hear through his headphones, describing architectural features and plant species he'd researched. Most neighbors waved or ignored him, but Jamal noticed how Patricia Winters would stop conversations to watch him, sometimes following him with her gaze until he turned a corner. One evening, Marcus received a text from a neighbor named David. Just FYI, Patricia was asking if anyone knew what that Robinson boy was really doing on his walks. Said it seemed suspicious to her that he went the same route every day. I told her to knock it off, but thought you should know. Marcus didn't tell Jamal, not wanting to taint this one thing that brought his son such joy. Instead, he began casually working from the front room during Jamal's walks, one eye always on the window. 2 days later, Jamal returned from his walk with an unusual smile. Dad, you know Mrs. Chen on Willow Street, the one with all the rose bushes. He maneuvered onto the couch, setting his crutches aside. The retired biology teacher. Marcus looked up from his laptop. She was outside today and asked about my walking podcast. When I told her I was identifying plants, she invited me into her garden. Jamal's face lit up. She taught me about hybridizing roses and said I could come back any time. She even gave me these. He pulled a small envelope from his pocket, carefully opening it to reveal rose seeds. She said I have a scientist's observation skills. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest ease slightly. That's great, son. See? Not everyone here is like Patricia. Mrs. Chen said something weird, though. Jamal frowned. She asked if we were holding up okay under the scrutiny. When I asked what she meant, she just patted my hand and said, your father has more friends here than he realizes. Marcus made a mental note to send Mrs. Chen a thank you card. These small alliances were precious in their increasingly hostile environment. The next day, Marcus received an email from his boss. Taking photos of your property, it read. Some woman called claiming to be from your HOA, said you're in violation of home business regulations by working remotely. I told her our company policy is none of her business. Watch your back. She seemed determined to cause trouble. That night, Marcus installed security cameras. As he mounted the final one, David from 3 houses down walked over. Good call on the cameras, David said quietly. Patricia's been telling people at the country club that you're up to something illegal because you're home during business hours. He hesitated. Look, I should have spoken up sooner at the HOA meetings. A lot of us should have. Why didn't you? Marcus asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. David looked away. Fear? Complacency? She's ruined people here before, spread rumors, made life unbearable. He handed Marcus a flash drive. This is footage from my security cameras for the past month. Showed your son just walking normally, plus Patricia following him twice. Maybe it'll help if things escalate. As David walked away, Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. That night, he lay awake, wondering if Jamal's independence was worth the risk, while watching his son the next morning, carefully planning his route, excitement in his eyes at the prospect of stopping by Mrs. Chen's garden again. Marcus knew he couldn't take this freedom away. He simply doubled his vigilance, checking the security app more frequently and working exclusively from the front room now, the window offering a partial view of Jamal's route. Autumn had transformed Oakwood Heights into a canvas of amber and crimson when Jamal set out for his walk, his lightweight jacket zipped against the October chill. In his headphones, his favorite science podcast discussed Mars exploration, the host's excitement matching his own as he carefully navigated the uneven sidewalk near Maple Street. He didn't notice Patricia Winters exit her house ahead, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, he's here again, walking suspiciously slow. No, I've told you, he doesn't look like he belongs here. She ended her call when she saw Jamal approaching. Blocking his path, she called out sharply, "Excuse me." Jamal, startled, nearly lost his balance as he removed his headphones. "Hi, Mrs. Winters," he said, recognizing her from HOA meetings. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" Her tone made it clear here meant more than just the sidewalk. "Just taking my walk. I know where you claim to live," she interrupted, stepping closer. "What I want to know is why you're always watching our houses day after day." Confused, Jamal tried explaining his physical therapy routine, but Patricia cut him off. "I've already called Neighborhood Watch. They'd find it very interesting that you case the same houses daily." When Jamal attempted to step around her, Patricia grabbed his arm. The sudden movement unbalanced him and one crutch clattered to the sidewalk. As he instinctively reached toward her to stabilize himself, Patricia's face contorted in fear or something performing as fear. "He's attacking me," she shrieked to no one. In one fluid motion, she pulled a canister from her cardigan pocket and sprayed directly into Jamal's face. The pain was instantaneous and overwhelming, like his eyes and lungs were simultaneously on fire. Blinded, Jamal fell hard onto the concrete, his vulnerable body crumpling as he gasped for air between screams. Through his agony, he heard Patricia's voice, oddly calm now. "I told them you didn't belong here." The next moments arrived in disjointed flashes, a neighbor shouting, "What have you done?" The cool brass someone helped him roll onto, a stranger's voice saying, "Keep recording, this is assault." His father's familiar hands finally finding him, Marcus's voice breaking as he repeated, I'm here." The world was reduced to pain and fragments of sound. Jamal tried to speak but could only cough, his lungs on fire. Through swollen eyelids, he caught glimpses of movement, blurry figures arguing. Patricia's voice rose above the chaos, indignant now. "He was casing houses. He threatened me. I had every right to defend myself." Her voice didn't sound frightened. It sounded righteous, as if she'd accomplished something important. A woman's voice, Mrs. Chen. Cut through. "He's a child. A disabled child." "I didn't know that," Patricia shot back, though everyone knew she did. Someone placed a cool, wet cloth over Jamal's eyes, offering momentary relief. He recognized David's voice nearby, unusually stern. "I called 911. They're on their way. And Patricia, I've been recording since you grabbed him. All of it." "You wouldn't dare," Patricia hissed. After the hospital room's fluorescent lights hummed as doctors explained that while Jamal's eyes would recover, the psychological trauma might linger. Outside, reporters gathered. The story of an HOA president pepper-spraying a disabled black teenager had exploded across social media after 3 witnesses uploaded videos. Their Oakwood Heights neighbors chose sides with alarming speed. Some brought food and offered testimonies about other incidents involving Patricia. Others questioned why Jamal had been wandering around unsupervised. The neighborhood message board became a battleground until the HOA's legal counsel shut it down completely. When Marcus returned home to collect clothes for Jamal, he found the ramp splashed with paint and a note. Lawsuit equals trouble. But alongside the hate came unexpected allies. David, the neighbor who'd warned about Patricia, had organized a rotating security watch. Mrs. Chen from across the street had cleaned the ramp before Marcus even saw the damage. The high school principal arrived personally to arrange remote learning accommodations. Most surprisingly, Patricia's own daughter, a law student at the state university, contacted Marcus through his lawyer, offering to testify about her mother's history of similar behavior. At the emergency HOA meeting 4 days later, the community center overflowed. Patricia arrived with her own attorney, her defiance unmistakable despite her carefully cultivated appearance of victimhood. "I was protecting our community," she insisted. He matched the description off. "Of what? A black teenager using crutches?" interrupted Mrs. Chen, normally quiet at these functions. "My security cameras show him walking this route for months. The only threat here was you." The room erupted. When order was finally restored, Marcus stood, leaning heavily on the same model of crutches his son used. The room fell silent as he placed Jamal's hospital bill on the projector. "My son asked me something this morning," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "He asked if we should move, if it would be easier." He looked around the room, meeting eyes both hostile and supportive. I told him we don't run from injustice. We transform it. This isn't just about my black son. It's about whether your community actually believes the values on that sign at the neighborhood entrance, Oakwood Heights, where everyone belongs. The silence that followed was deafening. In the back row, someone began to clap slowly. Others joined until applause filled the room. Patricia's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she brushed him off, standing to face Marcus directly. This is absurd. I devoted 15 years to protecting this neighborhood's standards. Ask yourselves who's really causing the property values to fall. She gestured dismissively toward Marcus. His constant complaints, his refusal to comply with simple regulations, his son wandering around unsupervised. My son has a name, Marcus cut in, his voice like steel. Jamal, a 16-year-old honor student who grew roses and studied architecture, who now has nightmares and panic attacks. He turned to the room. How many of your children walk these sidewalks alone, drive cars, go to the park? Yet my black disabled son doing the same thing was threatening enough to be assaulted. Patricia's face reddened. This isn't about race. I didn't even know. You've known exactly who we are since day one. Marcus interrupted, pulling out his phone. But here's something you might not know. I record all interactions regarding my son's disability. Legal in this state when there's potential discrimination. He pressed play and Patricia's voice filled the room. We need to find some way to get them out before more of them follow. The Robinsons don't fit the aesthetic we're trying to maintain. The timestamp showed it was from an HOA executive session 2 weeks after they moved in. Winter had settled over Oakwood Heights by the time Patricia Winters stood before the judge, pleading guilty to assault in exchange for dropped hate crime charges. Her sentence, community service at a rehabilitation center for disabled youth, mandatory anger management, and a restraining order keeping her from the Robinsons, divided the community again. Some called it too harsh, others too lenient. The civil settlement remained confidential, though Patricia's sudden house listing suggested its significance. For Jamal, justice looked different. It was the newly established Oakwood Heights Accessibility Committee, which he co-chaired with David's daughter. It was the ramp installations appearing at neighborhood homes hosting youth gatherings. It was his physical therapy progress, aided by the community pool now open year-round after residents voted to increase HOA fees to fund it. Most importantly, it was the day he finally completed his walking route again. 5 months after the incident, as Jamal rounded the final corner, he froze. Lining the sidewalk were neighbors, some familiar, some who had previously averted their eyes, holding signs. Welcome back, Jamal. Marcus watched from their driveway, remembering how close they'd come to leaving. The legal battles had drained their savings. Jamal still attended therapy twice weekly for PTSD. Tensions remained with certain neighbors. If something fundamental had shifted, that evening, as they sat on their front porch, something they'd never dared before, a new family drove slowly down the street, clearly house hunting. The parents, a mixed-race couple with twin daughters, looked tentatively at Holmes. Without hesitation, Jamal raised his hand in welcome. The mother smiled, waving back. Hey, Dad, Jamal said quietly. I think they're looking at the Winters house. Marcus nodded, watching his son's face. Would that be okay, having new neighbors there? Jamal considered this, the memory of pain balanced against the community that had ultimately chosen justice. Yeah, he decided finally. Everyone deserves a home where they belong. As the family's car disappeared around the corner, Marcus realized that in their fight to stay, they had transformed a house into something they never fully had before, a home in a community that, imperfect as it remained, was finally living up to its promise.